I remember the moment I rolled off that winding country road into the gravel courtyard of Arden's Rest, heart tired from miles of rain and uncertainty. The sky pressed down in bruised purples and grays, each drop drumming against my windshield as though to warn me. The inn loomed ahead, its windows like hollow eyes, reflecting every flicker of my headlights. No chatter greeted me across the empty stretch of asphalt, only the distant rasp of branches scratching the roof in the gathering dusk. Inside the lobby, a single oil lamp flickered against polished wood. Lavender swirled in the corners of the air, oddly sweet among the damp chill. I felt eyes on me even before I saw her. An elderly woman perched behind the reception desk, silver hair bound in a neat coil, posture impossibly still. Her gaze held me steady as she slid a heavy brass key across the counter. I caught the engraved number 6 before it slipped into my palm. I didn't think to ask why she handed my name an unspoken weight. I didn't think to wonder why no one else passed through the lobby. All I knew was exhaustion. The corridor upstairs stretched long and silent. Sconces flickered over peeling wallpaper, pale vines curling over cream like whispers caught in the grain. The door at the very end bore the same brass number, its surface cool under my fingertips. When I stepped inside, the smell of dust and lavender wrapped around me. The bed's sheets lay crisp and inviting, a single window revealing the restless forest beyond. Lightning flickered, and I welcomed the promise of sleep, never suspecting I was treading into something that had waited for me all along. Sleep came easily, until it shattered at just after 2, when I felt that silent breath behind my ear. My eyes snapped open into darkness so complete it pressed against my lids. I lay still, heart hammering. The hush in room 6 was absolute until I heard it. A soft murmur rising from the walls themselves, as though the very wood was speaking. My name drifted through the wallpaper's floral pattern, slow and deliberate. I rose, each movement deafening in the silence, and approached the wall. The pattern seemed to shift beneath my gaze, as though alive. When I pressed my ear against it, the voice slipped in again, my name, followed by a plea that sent every hair on my arms to attention. It sounded distant, mournful, urgent. Frozen in place, I stared at the pale vines curling across faded cream. With trembling fingers, I traced the edge of the wallpaper. It rattled softly, revealing darkness behind the wood. A slit, narrow and unwelcoming. The air beyond felt cold, damp as though exhaling centuries of secrets. I wanted to run, but fascination and fear held me rooted. The whisper paused, hanging in the silence. A challenge, an invitation, a warning. Dawn broke in washes of gray. I couldn't move past the memory of that soft voice behind the wall. I dressed and headed downstairs, mind wound tight. In the lobby's stillness, the lamp's glow showed the woman's steady figure behind the desk. Our eyes met, and I heard her unspoken questions. Her face remained calm as I pretended normalcy. I withheld the tremor in my voice when I walked past the desk. No words were exchanged. It was as if the inn itself conspired to keep me silent. The ledger on the counter lay open, pages crisp. In my peripheral vision, I imagined entries flickering like ghosts, the names of those who had whispered back. Outside, the rain had slowed to a persistent mist. I rose from the chair and left without greeting, feeling every step echo through the empty hall. Before the door closed behind me, I glanced up at the single window over my car. It was dark, empty, or so I convinced myself. That evening, unable to coax life from my engine, I found myself climbing the stairs once more toward room 6. Rain pelted the roof in urgent staccato. Each footstep reverberated in the deserted corridor. The brass key weighed heavy in my pocket as I reached the door. I slipped inside to the same elements: the bed, the lamp, the wallpaper curling at the edges. Yet the air felt electric, charged as though the walls themselves had remembered me. I stood for a long moment before the whisper came, soft at first, then insistent, coaxing me closer. I placed my palm on the wallpaper. It shivered beneath my skin, the threads trembling like veins. The whisper pleaded something I could not yet discern, but in its longing I felt an ache deep in my chest. Driven by a compulsion I could not name, I tore at the paper. Underneath, a narrow gap revealed blackness so complete it seemed to swallow every glimmer of light. My hand recoiled as though burned. The skin on my fingertips felt damp, like water pooled in a cavern too dark to know. The whisper rose to a crescendo, filling my head, my name over and over, urgent and pleading. I tumbled backwards, gasping, pressed against the edge of the bed. The room tilted. The lamp flickered, throwing dancing shadows that seemed to lean in close. My breath came in ragged bursts as I stared at the torn wallpaper, at that narrow slit where darkness waited. I didn't sleep again. I lay awake listening to the hush between drips of water and the thrum of my own heartbeat. Every so often, when thunder rolled over the trees, I could swear the whisper tried to shape itself into words I was too terrified to hear. Morning arrived unclear. Was it 3 days later or 3 hours? The clock on the nightstand had stopped at 2:13 a.m., the hands frozen, forever marking the moment it all began. I sat up and peered at the dial, wanting to claw it back to life, to turn back time to before I heard that first murmur. I slipped from the bed, stepping carefully around the pools of shadow where the floor creaked under my weight. Drawers in the nightstand were open, as though rummaged, though I'd left them closed. The inside was empty, as if someone had taken everything and left no trace. My mind raced. Had I been sleepwalking? Had the innkeeper come in? No, I'd never heard the door open. In the bathroom mirror, my reflection flickered. I saw myself there, pale, eyes hollow. I whispered my own name to the glass, testing the shape of my voice. The mirror rippled like water disturbed by a raindrop. I yanked back, chest heaving. I understood then the room wasn't just haunted, it was alive. It fed on my fear, my doubt, my need for answers. It had called me here, and it wasn't done. I refused to stay. I packed a single bag, stuffing it with clothes, my phone charger, anything I could carry. The photograph and the typed note went in too. My hands trembled as I zipped the bag closed. Rain hammered the windows, the inn creaking around me in protest. As I swung my bag over my shoulder, the whisper returned, soft, urgent. Don't go. It seeped through the walls, through the floor, into my bones. I froze. The voice was not a demand anymore. It was regretful, pleading. I clenched my fists, ignoring the beads of sweat on my palms. I yanked open the door and sprinted down the hallway. Doors rattled on their hinges as I passed. The chandelier overhead shuddered, casting kaleidoscopes of shadow. At the window end, I hesitated. Rain so heavy it smothered every sound except my own ragged breath. Then I ran, through the storm, into the forest, leaving the inn's light behind me. Lightning flickered overhead, illuminating trees that bent toward me, branches twisting like fingers. I didn't look back until I reached the gravel road, soaked and shivering in the downpour. The inn stood silent in the gloom. No light, no sign of movement, just the endless walls that spoke in my name. I pulled the note from my pocket and read it again. Wait. I swallowed hard. I hadn't waited. I ran. And I still heard it, soft, distant, insistent. You will remember. I stayed huddled at the roadside until dawn bled pale gold across the wet earth, too frightened to move.
When I finally forced myself up, my legs trembled under me, and I realized I still clutched the note, wait, as though it might anchor me against whatever lurked in those walls. I tucked it into my jacket and started walking, the gravel crunching beneath my boots, the forest's edge a dark stain at my back. Every so often, I'd catch movement at the corner of my eye, a branch twisting impossibly, a shape drifting between trunks. My breath came in shallow gasps, and every whisper of wind sounded like that voice, echoing the single command. I shook my head, trying to dislodge it, but the word wait imprinted itself behind my eyelids. By mid-morning, I reached a gas station, one of those roadside relics with a single pump island and a sun-bleached sign. Inside, the attendant eyed me warily as I bought a hot coffee and a map. I drank deep, letting the scalding liquid burn away the cold. I traced my finger along the road back to town, marking where I'd left my car. "Rough night?" the clerk asked, voice a dull hum. I managed a nod, offering a shaky smile. He didn't press. I don't think anyone around here wanted to know about Arden's rest. Fueled by caffeine and dread, I drove back the way I'd come. The road wound through pines that dripped last night's rain, the asphalt glistening under low sun. My phone buzzed. It was dead at 3%. I let it go. Nothing mattered except returning to that inn, tearing open every secret until I understood what I'd unleashed. When I turned onto the inn's drive, hush fell over the world. Arden's Rest sat silent, its windows dark, gutters dripping like teeth. The sign swung in the breeze, rattling against its post. I parked and grabbed a flashlight from my glove compartment, its beam slicing through the damp morning air. Inside, the lobby was deserted. The oil lamp lay cold, untouched. Footsteps echoed as I ascended the stairs. Mine and something else's. Softer, almost hesitant, trailing just behind me. My pulse thudded so loud I thought it would crack my ribs. At room 6, I reached the door and hesitated. A bead of sweat trickled down my temple. The key felt heavy again. I unlocked the door, stepping in. The morning light, thin as tissue paper, filtered through the curtains. The room looked as if no one had touched it since my flight. The torn wallpaper flapped in a breeze I couldn't feel. The scratches on the wall pulsed darkly, and the bed sat undisturbed. But beneath the quiet slept something vast, waiting for me to wake it. I clicked on my flashlight and trained its beam on the gaps in the paper. Beneath, the wood had been gouged into spirals, concentric rings of deep red and black. At the center, the grain swirled unnaturally, as if whatever lived there had left its fingerprints pressed into the wood itself. My breath caught. I wanted to burn it all down, but I knew then I hadn't come this far to run. I knelt beside the wall, shining light into the deepest gouge. The wood's texture felt wet under my fingertips, sticky like sap. I pressed a thumb to the cut and recoiled as pain flared, as though the wall had bitten me. I jerked back, leaving a smear of blood against the paper. The beam trembled. The whisper rolls around me, a chorus now, the same word repeated in layered cadences. Remember. I closed my eyes, fighting to hold on to my own name, my own memories. But the walls wanted my story. They hungered for something I'd buried, the truth about why they called me here. My chest tightened as the weight of memory surfaced. Vague images surfaced. A house in distant childhood. A door built into a pantry wall. A whisper in the dark. I remembered a game of hide and seek, the laughter echoing, the scent of cinnamon cookies baked by a grandmother long gone. Then the game's tone shifted. Something changed behind that hidden door. A hush that tasted of old sorrow. I pressed a hand to my temple, the flashlight beam skittering across the ceiling. I realized I'd never really fled childhood nightmares. I just plugged them away. locked the door, and threw away the key. Arden's Rest was more than an inn. It was a vessel for those lost memories, reconstructing itself around my fear until I relived the moment I first heard that whisper. The beam settled on scratches that formed a crude pattern, almost like letters carved in desperation. I squinted. Love. Remember. The letters bled into one another as though carved across decades. Love. Remember. My throat constricted. I'd forgotten the love that built these walls, the love that turned to grief and shaped every secret corridor. A sudden crash behind me made me whirl. The door slammed shut, plunging the room into a single hot beam from the flashlight. I rushed to the knob. It wouldn't budge. My heart pounded in my ears as the whisper curled around me, closer, intimate. Do you remember where I left me? I sank to the floor, back against the wall, shining light on the carvings. The word grandmother pulsed faintly under the grain. My breath caught. My grandmother's cottage had a hidden door in the pantry, a pantry I opened too late, stumbling onto a room filled with mourning and shadows. She'd whispered there then, asked me to remember her promise, to keep her alive in memory. I'd forgotten. Tears blurred my vision as I knelt and pressed my palm against those spirals, murmuring, I remember. The room sighed, the wallpaper fluttered, and the scratches glowed warm. The beam of light wavered, and for a moment the whisper became her voice, soft and grateful. Then the door clicked. I stood, flashlight trembling in my grip. The corridor beyond lay quiet, forgiving. But I knew I couldn't leave, not until I honored that memory, until I carried her love back into the world beyond these whispering walls. I stepped into the corridor as though emerging from a dream. The morning light here was gentler, softening the harsh angles of peeling paint and worn carpeting. My flashlight beam danced across the numbers on each door before settling on 6, now silent. The brass knob returned to its familiar coolness. I exhaled, feeling the knot in my chest loosen just a fraction. Memories of my grandmother flooded back in sudden clarity. Her gentle voice reading stories by lamplight, the swirl of cinnamon and clove in her kitchen, the hidden...
Thank you, I said, voice soft. I didn't need to explain. She slid the key into a small box, and the metal tinkled as it landed among other keys. Numbers erased, stories preserved. Outside, the rain had stopped. The forest exhaled mist into the morning air. I carried my bag to the car, the typed notes tucked safely in my coat pocket. As I started the engine, I glanced once more at Arden's Rest, its windows reflecting the pale sun. I drove away slowly, the gravel crunching beneath the tires, leaving an imprint of memory in every turn. I didn't look back until the end disappeared behind a veil of trees. In my heart, I carried her story, her love and laughter, as vivid as the day she told it. And whenever I felt the world grow too quiet, I'd whisper her name, and the walls around me would answer. One spring morning, I returned home to find a jar of dried lavender on my porch with a note, "For your inner inn, from a fellow traveler." The handwriting was unfamiliar but kind. I inhaled the lavender sweetness and felt my grandmother's presence enfold me once more. Arden's Rest had taught me that stories bridge strangers, whispering across time. In my study, I pinned photographs of the inn's corridors, the pantry chamber, the sitting room's shawl, and the cradle's palm above my desk. Beneath each, I wrote reflections on memory, love, and the hidden rooms within ourselves. When friends visited, I guided them through my inner inn, inviting them to share their own discoveries. It became a place of solace and inspiration, a living shrine to whispered truths. I dreamed again of the hidden passage, but this time I walked it with confidence. The carvings glowed softly under my fingertips as I entered the pantry chamber. Herbs beckoned with renewed vibrancy. My grandmother's lullaby played faintly on unseen wind chimes. I closed my eyes, feeling her hand on my shoulder. Well done. When I woke, I carried the affirmation into my waking life, a compass guiding me through both familiar rooms and uncharted corridors. Years passed, and I became known as the memory keeper among a small community of heritage enthusiasts. I helped restore an old manor's hidden basement library, deciphered a farmstead's family chronicle carved into floorboards, and curated an exhibit of secret messages found in chimney walls. Each project echoed Arden's Rest lesson: walls remember if we choose to listen. On the 10th anniversary of my first day, I returned to Arden's Rest for a private ceremony. Alone in room 6, I lit a single candle. Its flame danced across the peeling wallpaper and healed carvings. I read aloud the full poem, letting its words drift through the secret passage and settle in the pantry chamber. Then I released the paper lantern through the doorway's hidden seam. It floated upward, casting amber light into every corner, carrying my grandmother's story and mine as one. The inn seemed to breathe deeper once the lantern ascended, as though every beam of its glow rekindled ancient embers. I felt the walls press in, comfortingly this time, like an embrace from generations past. I closed my eyes, absorbing the hush, knowing I had come full circle. I descended the stairs into the lobby where the innkeeper waited, though now I sensed she was something more, a guardian of memory, an embodiment of every whisper that had ever called a traveler home. We exchanged a soft smile, wordlessly acknowledging our shared purpose. Outside, dawn broke in rose and gold. Arden's Rest radiated warmth against the morning haze. Driving away, I noticed the gravel drive bore fresh imprints of footprints behind me, evidence that my spirit lingered still. I turned, but saw only mist. The inn, I realized, exists wherever memory takes root, in hearts, in journals, in the quiet places we dare to listen. I pressed my palm to the car door and whispered, "Thank you." The whisper that rose in reply was mine and hers, woven together. Keep listening. Back at home, I placed the brass key on a shelf with a tiny plaque: Arden's Rest, Room 6, Threshold of Memory. Friends who visited would ask about it, and I'd tell them the story of walls that whisper, of hidden doors, of love rediscovered. Their eyes would grow soft, and a hush would fall, as though the key itself exhaled those memories. In this way, Arden's Rest became part of every home I touched. One evening, I dreamt the innkeeper visited me in my study. She handed me a blank journal and said, "It's time for your story now." I understood. The journey never ends. Each person must become their own memory keeper, forging hidden passages of the heart. I woke with the journal in my hands, its pages ready to receive new whispers. I began that journal with the simple line, "The walls remember what we forget." Then I wrote of my grandmother's pantry chamber, the cradle's lullaby, the carved initials in roses. I wrote of every traveler's whisper I've been honored to carry.
With each sentence, I felt the walls around me pulse in unison. My story joined the chorus of all who listen. Now, whenever night falls and the world grows still, I press my head to the nearest wall and close my eyes. I hear faint murmurs, echoes of laughter in a pantry, of lullabies in a cradle, of footsteps in a corridor painted mint green. They speak of hidden doors and brave seekers, of love that outlives every shadow. And I answer softly, I remember. Because in every whisper lies a story, and in every story, a life waits to be remembered.